Welcome, sales professionals, to Sales Trainers List and Sell Online. Second series. Just for those of you that have been before, understand that we will try to give you a different perspective on each subject matter as we go through it. Sometimes there might be some additional subject matter coming in, but you can fairly well rely on the fact that we will be going to air with this stuff each and every week. Your feedback is invaluable. So if you can actually send through things that you want to hear about, what I'm going to try to do is keep List and Sell Online pertinent, obviously, to the category. So those of you that are wondering, we've got 3, now 4, as they relate particularly to the prospector ideal, property careers, prospector school, obviously for sales associates, those supporting salespeople, or on their own, or entering the real estate profession, or trying to break a market or reinvigorate a market. So this particular thing has a direct correlation to foothold. This is about getting those seed listings and then working off them. Those of you that are familiar with Sales Trainer will indeed be equally as familiar with the not just the strategy, but the way in which it then operates. Here, we're dealing fundamentally in the first instance with the holistic profession in 4 distinct areas. Obviously, prospecting. In that prospecting area, we'll be talking about traction. So the assumption is when you're getting into the teachings around here that you've got a listing or you're getting listings and you're broken into the market and you're looking to leverage off those listings, turning 1 into 2, 2 into 4 by building your market share. And this obviously has an association with Sales Trainer, the List and Sell Tour. Who knows when we'll be able to get that online, but we will, and I've already worked this out, have some specific series, not least of which this quarter, the main thrust, the main function will be around the listing presentation, because clearly, I can see that most of the problems that are emanating inside of any transaction, most of those that I hear back are coming from the listing presentation, what is done and said to win the listing. So not least of which is we want to ensure that you're winning listings on your terms and conditions. You are not winning them by being, I guess, held to price. You are not winning them because you've had to give a concession, whether it be around fee, whether it be about marketing or otherwise. So as we go through, and this first session today, session 1, is about premeditation. It's about rethinking your position, making it current to the current climate that we've got, worldwide. I don't think anyone would not be affected, or at least understand the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to bear on real estate markets. I think that you're going to see, because that very same issue has had an almost catastrophic effect, although it's not felt just yet, on economies. That has to reverberate inside the real estate space. So often I keep hearing about this notion, that because the real estate market has been relatively good in that, you list a property, you pretty much sell it. I haven't really spoken much about list to sell ratios. I've spent very little time at all on the ideal of managing price expectation, because it hasn't really come to the fore. But markets change and you need to adapt ahead of that change. I've been relatively quiet, although I can tell you those of you that have been close to me and speak to me with great regularity, I believe, would support me when I've said that it's going to be pretty much reminiscent of the late 80s, early 90s in particular. And I know that's a long time ago, it's 3 decades ago, but all of the signs that I'm seeing are relatively similar. albeit that I think the outcome, the conditions are going to be far worse than what we've experienced thus far. So I believe that prices will tank. I think you're headed for, and there's lots of talk at the moment. You know, there was speculation initially of what they call a V curve, that the market, you know, was affected initially mostly around sentiment, and then would bounce back and the economy would be okay. That one seems to have been let go of, not least of which by virtue of what we've seen inside the marketplace. Then there was talk of a U shape, that it would just drop down gradually and then gradually recover. Well, I'm here to tell you, I believe we're in an O shape. What's an O shape? Not this, I want to send you round and round in circles, and I've got to say this, not that I'm trying to quell your enthusiasm. I am the eternal optimist. Far be it from me to dampen anyone's enthusiastic approach to the real estate market. What do I mean by O shape? Well, quite simply, I mean oversupply. I mean that we are headed to a point where, although it would feel foreign to many of you in many markets at the moment now, because I do have the privilege of talking to a lot of people inside of that work in different markets, and you feel like there's this almost reluctance for people to transact around the real estate space, because they've almost taken it as a given that their property will be readily sold, and indeed that they'll be readily sold at a premium price, but they haven't been able to find or secure something to buy, and this has added up to their reluctance. Well, that's a Mexican standoff. But again, I just hate to sound like I'm giving everyone a history lesson, but that, again, is reminiscent of what happened, you know, very late 80s as we went into the early 90s, where, you know, prices were going up almost every week. You list it, you sold it. List to sell ratios weren't even an issue. Didn't need to talk about it. And then almost overnight, there was an announcement around a recession being official. I know that it was very similar in the New Zealand market, and then all of a sudden it was tough. So it was list, you know, at a particular price, grind your way down, and then off you go. In fact, it was as little as yesterday that I heard that a salesperson, you know, went out to a listing presentation, came back to their sales team leader, and was talking about the fact that, you know, the people that were just expecting way too much for the property, that they were overly expectant around price, and the agent was debating this and trying to substantiate that their expectation was too high in line with what was going on, and at this stage did not have the listing agreement. And I'm going to say this again, I'll talk about this on the next installment, or one or two ahead, I forget when it is. Still, there's a couple of very, very strong maxims that ring true. So first up, I want to say this to you, all of you that are listening to this particular broadcast. The first thing is that the market is full of opportunity. You see, when the majority go a certain way, there's a couple of things that always ring true inside the real estate space. And the first thing is this, that most of the challenges that you're confronted with, the answer typically lies in paradox, like doing the opposite, not for the sake of it. But if you look at the paradoxical situation and then you try to build something, that is of significant value commercially to the people that you're actually seeking to do business with, then that's the answer. That's the alternative. That's where you can actually have the lion's share of the business, or in my opinion, an optimum amount of business, without having to work and grind as hard as everyone else. To my mind, competing with everybody on the same terms and conditions is a grind. So if I'm trying to prove, especially if I'm trying to break a market, if I'm trying to break against players utilizing the same argument, playing on the same field that they are, this is just a nonsense. This is crazy, and one thing that you shouldn't do. So, you know, at the end of the day, you can either run at it or you can run from it. Now, foolhardiness, and I'm seeing this firsthand, and I don't believe, doesn't matter where you're operating from, at some stage you're most likely going to experience this. But in New South Wales, as I just said, we've hit lockdown. I saw the same thing happen when it was down in Victoria, Melbourne being the epicenter of that, and even to a degree up there in Queensland, which has also been affected. And I know the same's been in Western Australia. And, you know, New Zealand, you guys were very early in the piece, straight on to lockdown. And there's still those ramifications that are sitting in and around that. You know, it could be anything from the compulsory mask wearing all the way through to actually having to stay at home and typically and basically isolate yourself from other people out there. You can look at this as adversity if you choose to. And you can go into denial about things and say, look, you know, sooner or later it'll get back to normal. But what is normal? I mean, at the end of the day, we deal with a market, and markets are quite pliable, but they are also, they're quite liquid. They move very, very quickly. You know, we talk about this in terms of price. Anyone that's out there that's trying to guess what a property will sell for right now is quite seriously deluded. You know, when people say to me, what's my property worth? I go, what time is it? What price do you want? Today's price or yesterday's price? So I look at this as opportune. So I'll stop with all the negative or the downside and start to explain to you where the opportunities exist. There's a couple of maxims that sit in place right now, not least of which is GML. This never changes. I'll say this over and over and over again. And here we have yet another situation which is fairly indicative of that which I've always explained to you. You just cannot get into trouble listing property. Listing always comes before selling. Now, some of you might go, well, if listing comes before selling and we get a whole lot of listings and the market is indeed oversupplied, how does that work? You bet it works. It works better than you could possibly ever have imagined. Yeah, because the whole idea is you stock the shelves. Yes, there's going to be less buyers for those properties. Yes, there are going to be properties that, quite frankly, will miss out, because if people have done their calculations on a high market and trying to buy in a low market, well, that does, relatively speaking, that doesn't work at all. But the reality is that you can't win a lottery you don't have a ticket in. In fact, if I was sitting with any of the owners that I have that are, when I've been down there and run a listing presentation, but there is still a reluctance, or they're waiting for market conditions to change, or they're in the throes of renovating a property to get it prepared to put on the market, or if they are waiting to find something before they buy, I say to them quite simply, like, here's the language that I use. Look, have you ever been window shopping? And they go, most people have. They go, yeah. And I said, so when you're out there window shopping, looking for something that you want to purchase, but you are not in the financial position to purchase it yet, is it easy enough to find exactly what you want? I know there's a longing to find what you want, but let's run in a contrasted story. When you finally do have the money and you do go out there knowing that you can buy what you are seeking to buy, all you have to do is find it. Does it magically appear? And they say yes. I said, well, this is the same scenario that you've got. Because my question for you is, if you are saying to me that you don't want to list the property ahead of actually finding something to buy, my question is quite simple. What happens if you do find something? And they go, well, I'll buy it. So, well, now you own two properties, or at least you're running the risk of owning two properties at the same time. Surely this was not the goal. If there's somebody who's reluctant because they're looking to fix a property up, I'll just say to them, this is the same conversation I'll have with them. And these are conversations you need to be having today. Why are you waiting for COVID to clear? Well, it's also presented an opportunity where we can get the renovations done and we want to get those completed. I said, look, here's the scenario. Is there any evidence whatsoever? Now, I can tell you there's not, but I'm asking you if you can provide me with any evidence that would suggest that the market is likely to escalate in price in the foreseeable future. No. So you would agree it's kind of at its optimum. They go, yeah. is there a risk? Is there any evidence that suggests that prices could come down? Well, of course there is. That could happen. So to my mind, delaying getting your property on the market is only in reality waiting for less money at worst and the same money at best. So why does it make no difference? Surely you should get the property on the market. You see, what's not understood by property sellers is that markets are liquid and markets change. You don't control the market as an estate agent. You work with what the cards that are dealt to you. So in premeditation, my attitude has always been, and I hope you adopt the very same attitude in your own playing, and that is to get all of the problem listings across. Again, I was reminded of a statement that I've been making for years that I ran through with an agent yesterday, and he said that, you know, his salespeople are just wanting to get a certain number of good listings. I said, mate, what defines a good listing? And I ask you to write this down and get this in your head. Yeah. And people say to me openly, they go, a good listing is one that is well priced or will sell quickly. I said, no. I said, in a market where, you know, it's undersupplied, any listing is a good listing. But moving forward, a good listing is one where the motive, the reason for selling is such that it will leave you to believe that these people won't own that same address in 6 months' time. So if you haven't already in premeditation, please understand that you have to make your dialogue motive-centric. Your dialogue needs to be motive-centric in prospecting. Not a case of saying, are you selling? It's I would even be changing the words to, are you moving? Where do you want to move to? What is it that you are trying to do? Yeah. How soon do you need to do this? When do you need to be there? These are questions that create an empathetic disposition where you'll be heard, and will also create a disposition where the seller will be way more pliable than they have been. Very soon, people, I believe, again, I don't want to sound like a scaremonger, but you're going to see a look in sellers' eyes, and that look is one of helplessness. And what they're looking for is a consummate professional that can just look them in the eye and say, it's okay, I'll take you by the hand and I'll walk you through this. You'll come out of it unscathed. You have to stop with this apprehension of being in a disposition where you feel like, oh, I might have to deliver bad news and I'm going to get the blame for this. Well, I'm going to tell you, that's just a complete and utter nonsense. You see, as I used to say to people, the name's Mark, not market. I didn't do it. It is not your responsibility, yeah, to accept blame for the market condition. It is your responsibility to interpret that market condition, to foresee the market conditions and where they're going to go, and prescribe, for want of a better word, prescribe the reaction that property sellers have to take to this. And I'll say this over and over and over again. So to my mind, in prospecting, it's about getting listings on. How do you do that? You've got to show evidence of the fact that you are still turning over real estate. So often I'm saying to sellers, so I'm prospecting something I'll talk about in the next few weeks, but really want to draw to your attention right now. Please understand this around prospecting. It does not stop at the identification of a seller. And even at the identification of a seller, don't jump on them. Don't jump on them about getting the property on the market. Sure, make them aware that you are ready to do that whenever they choose to. But in prospecting, we need to understand that these days, it's a complete contrast from the way in which I used to operate many, many years ago. And that is that prospecting continues all the way up until a listing until a listing agreement is signed. So it goes past the listing presentation. if you want to stand out against your competition, understand that you have to provide significant evidence of your product's existence, and it needs to be validated to them. And there's two things that you need to work around this. I call it passive contact as opposed to direct contact. One of the dangers that we are seeing, and I've seen the fallout of this over and over again of late, is that agents are contacting incumbent sellers wanting to list their property far too often. I mean, and you see this all the time. Like they do it all the way up until listing the property, and then the communication drops off. Now, I'm not saying don't contact them directly. You've got to do that. But you are running the risk of that client saying to you, don't call us, we'll call you, or worse, putting them off to the point where they say, listen, we're not actually selling. And they just want you to stop badgering them. So you need to be, so answering the questions to both of those, first up, you need to be validating your product. So you need to have some sort of passive marketing communication going out. This can then take place of you not having to call them directly, but is as powerful. So I say you need to do things like this. If you haven't sent them, if you have some form of a pre-listing kit, and you didn't send it to them before the listing presentation, then get it out. I prefer to send what we call the property seller's research guide, which tells them or educates them around the sales transaction, how to select an agent, what are all the things they're going to be subjected to if they're talking to other agents. You need to continue to invite them to open for inspections. This is absolutely imperative. Why? Well, you might have never met them at an open for inspection. This is no reason not to contact them and continually invite them so they can see evidence of what's going on. As you make sales, or as anyone inside your company makes sales, these need to be SMS text to all those incumbent sellers. Why? Because then they can see evidence of the fact that you are still transacting real estate. Doesn't sound like a big deal? Well, mark my words, it will. In about 6 to 12 months, when transactions are slow, for you to actually get that information out demonstrates to a prospective seller that you are active in that marketplace and can jockey you, if you were, say, second or third choice, can jockey you almost in the first position overnight. You need to send evidence of buyers. So often, these poor sellers, are subjected to the nonsense that real estate agents put in front of them. When I talk about this at the listing presentation, things you need to mute. Don't talk about the fact that you need to invest money to advertise to find buyers. Yes, I think investment needs to be made into marketing, but marketing is not advertising. You see, sellers come to us because they believe we already have buyers. When we turn around and talk to them about investing in advertising to get buyers, this just, to them, represents a complete nonsense. So look at your product for what it is. Surrender to the ideal that it is easy to find a buyer. I've said this over and over again. So often we see this in listing presentations. Agents get in there and they behave like there's some magical formula to actually finding a buyer for a property. As I've said, and I openly say, as is written in the property seller's research guide, finding a buyer is the easy part. I used to have this conversation over and over again with for sale by owners where I'd say to them, it's easy to find a buyer, but the jury will always be out on whether or not you could have secured a better price from that buyer. And they say, what do you mean? I said, okay, let's say you found a buyer, then what are you going to do? And they look at me and they say, well, I'm going to sell it. I said, yeah, but what if the buyer offers significantly lower than what you asked for? They then turn around and say, well, we'll say no. I said, yeah, great. Then what? And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, 99% of buyers offer less initially than they're prepared to pay. So you tell me how you're going to get them to their optimum. And I know how to get them to a point beyond what they think they're prepared to pay. Tell me how you're going to do that. And the for sale by owner kind of gives up, especially if I'm running this dialogue by them in the third or fourth week. So I'll say it again, it's how you look at the equation. When we get into the listing presentation itself, just understand this, and now more than ever, if you don't make this significant change now, you're in all sorts of trouble. I had someone who joined me for the for the STM, Sales Trainer Mentor Program. This is where I talk to them each week. We set up their whole week, day by day, all the actions they've got to do and boost their productivity. Now, he was saying to me that he was winning 2 out of every 10 appraisals. I said, that's fantastic. He said, what do you mean? I said, because it sounds to me like you're winning a very high percentage of listing presentations. The only problem is you don't know the difference between the two. So what do you mean? I said, why do you feel the need to do market appraisals? And he looked at me and he said, well, I don't know what you mean. I said, well, I can actually tell you that if you focus on market appraisals in the market going forward, you're going to be so busy doing them that your numbers aren't going to change. In fact, they're probably not going to be better. You're only going to end up finding you're going to do a whole lot more work to be in the same position. And someone like me will just run roughshod over you. I said, why? I said, because I only do listing presentations. I know how to qualify. If you don't know how to qualify between a market appraisal and listing presentation, you're just letting yourself in for a whole lot of work and a whole lot of disappointment. And then people say to me, but I do market appraisals now because in the future, these people will come back to me and I'll list the property unopposed. Yeah, bullshit. That's bullshit. Will you stop listening to this bullshit that people profess? At the end of the day, the number one draw card to any incumbent seller is presence in the marketplace. So if you ignore someone today that has a market appraisal, but you build presence and in 3 years' time, you've got the lion's share of presence in that marketplace, that particular seller will come back to you. And so long as when you open your mouth, the right words fall out, they will list with you ahead of anyone that's been coochie-cooing them with market share, newsletters and bloody home-cooked recipes and all that sort of shit. So I'll say it again, focus, just make the decision. Yeah, when you make that decision, it seems fairly radical. It always seems radical when compared to what other people are doing inside the office. But for me, the only question that I have riding on my mind when I'm talking to a prospect is this property owner, are they active or are they dormant? If they're active, I want to get round there. If they're dormant, I just want to give them the information and the service they want as quickly, as readily as I can. And I hope to preclude any physical involvement from me. And then when you get to the selection process, what should that selection be based around? Are you still suffering the pressure that property sellers are selecting agents based upon the price they quote, the fee they charge, and the advertising expenses they want to get on board? This is just dumb. I mean, how is it that so years down the track, this is still occurring? I am just fascinated as to why agents put up with this. We all openly say, no matter how many people I have in the room, I say, is this the right way to choose an agent? And they say no. And then I pose this question, okay, then tell me what is the right way. So if you haven't figured that part out, let's figure that out together and get people choosing you, comparatively speaking, against other agents on professional capacity. And if you are dedicated to improving that professional capacity, then you'll never have to go near creating concessions in those areas. Yes, overquoting a price is a concession, because really what it is lying by omission, especially if you're giving assurances. But I want to teach you how to not value properties, rather to market them. Stop looking at what you think it might be worth and start looking at what you think you might be able to make it worth. Stop looking at fee as though you are charging someone something. You are in a position in consignment selling where you are free to demonstrate and show openly how you add value and indeed earn that fee. And if you earn that fee, you will feel fully vindicated in your prosperity. You won't feel guilty. You won't be suffering all the problems that occur with this. Later on, then we'll talk about managing expectations. I think this is going to be a huge thing. I want to show you that that you're not overpricing property if you're overly optimistic, because if it's plausible, if it's possible, you can bring the property on that way. So I'll list any property so long as it borders on sanity. I will get it on board. Yeah. And then I'll worry about market conditions, but I'll also list it openly, explaining that any price is possible so long as it borders on sanity, but without any assurances, because I don't feel responsible. There are market variables that are beyond the capacity of my control. And I say openly to sellers, any agent that tells you that they can predict with any clarity what the market value of your property is lying to you, because there are variables that are beyond the realms of their control. They can't control buyer sentiment. They can't control what the competition's doing. They can't control fiscal policy, and they definitely cannot control supply and demand. So these are things that we need to talk about. You need to bring these into your professional arsenal and understand how to manage the expectations, how to not be calling every owner every single day on just leading up to the listing presentation. Importantly, calling them every day once you actually have the property listed, vesting very strongly in a personable manner in their emotional bank account, because lots of withdrawals will need to be made with the O-shaped market that we're heading to, that oversupplied market. We'll talk about the fact, and some of you might be thinking, well, won't buyers become more difficult? Won't they become more, I guess, clammed up about selling their properties? Won't buyers be reluctant to offer certain amounts? Nonsense. Contrary to popular belief, irrespective of market conditions, buyers just want the best home they can afford, and they just want to get it at a price where they don't feel like they've been ripped off. So you need to know how to articulate all of the dialogue, yeah, that makes all of the dialogue that makes it possible to get sales across the line once a buyer connects with a property. If you use the dialogue you've been using in the more recent markets, I can almost guarantee you'll flounder. It's time to adapt to the market condition ahead of the change. So we've got to do this in an anticipative fashion. I hope this has made a lot of sense to you. I know that I've rabbited on, and it's all just been about the premeditation and getting an idea of where we're at and where we are looking to move to. I can assure you that I'm not incorrect around the market change that's about to occur. I just don't know how quickly it will occur and just how deep the oversupply will be. But I do know this. I know how to operate inside that environment. I know I can show you how to operate inside that environment. And I am very, very clear on the answers that we want to have moving forward. If you want to ask any questions that you want me to address in next week's edition, please feel free to email me, Mark with a K at salestrainer.com.au. And also, I'd ask you to contact me if you wish to, or even SMS me if you want to make sure that you get the audio recording. It's +61 410 592 165. And I'd be more than happy for anyone to jump on board and have a listen to this. So if you want to refer anyone or they want to join the series, I'm happy for them to listen into this week in, week out. If anyone has any interest in jumping on board with either Prospector School with the PC3M, where we monitor, manage, and mentor you in the foothold stage. If you want to jump on board with Sales Trainer Mentor, same scenario, but in the traction stage where we meet with you online every week and plan each week as they come, give me a call. Or then finally, those of you that are at the real estate rockstar level, aren't we having some fun there, where you move into high-end productivity and realize your full potential, your full capacity? You can also give me a call. Thanks for listening. Hope to catch you all next week.